Greetings and salutations, all. I.S. Anderson here once again for another Top 5 Wednesday. Yay! Okay. So today's topic is the top 5 genres. And for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure almost all of you do, a genre is a category of novels, or a lot of times they're broken up into subcategories or subgenres. And they're mainly used as a marketing tool, just so people know where to go to find the type of books that they like, but it also does help people to talk about them, like, well, what type of books do you like? Well, I like fantasy, or I like contemporary, or I like nonfiction, or things of that nature. And I chose my top 5 based on nothing other than my own personal opinion. Okay, so that's what this top 5 list is based on. If you want to get into what genre is the most popular nowadays, or which one is the hottest trending one, it's got obviously dystopia. Thanks mostly to the Hunger Games, and we see Divergent coming out, and a lot of the stories coming out nowadays, especially the YA stuff, is all dystopian. So, yeah, just to give you a little background. But on with the list now with number 5. Number 5 is weird fiction. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Now why would a guy like this like something called weird fiction? But to explain to the rest of you what it actually is, it's a subgenre of speculative fiction. The stories take place in the 19th and the early 20th century, having elements of both horror and fantasy. The stories combine the mythical and the supernatural with the scientific. Good examples of this genre are the works of H.P. Lovecraft and Arthur McCain. Number 4 genre for me is sword and sorcery, which is a subgenre of fantasy. It usually takes place in a typical fantasy world. People run around with swords. It's a medieval flavor to it. People fight, hand to hand, mostly with swords, and shoot bows at each other. There is magic usually. Usually only the bad guys use it though, but sometimes the good guys do. Magic is present, but it's not the main focus. The difference between sword and sorcery and something like high fantasy, whereas high fantasy is a goal-oriented, everybody works towards, the whole story is about achieving one particular goal, usually to save the world, whereas sword and sorcery, it's just what do we do that day, there's something to be done that day, like kill a certain guy or find a certain treasure, and it's just an ongoing series, it's not really one big goal. Good examples of this would be Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, and Thieves' World. Number 3 genre for me is dystopian. Now, as many of you know, a dystopian story is based on a community or society that has gone horribly wrong in some way, and in some important way is either undesirable or frightening. The reasons why it can go wrong are, vary from war, economic downfalls, natural disaster, or just the government deciding to want to become a bunch of total dicks. Good examples of this are 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, and of course, The Hunger Games. Number 2 genre is high fantasy. And I know I did touch on this before, but aside from the long-term, everlasting goal of usually saving the world, the main thing about high fantasy is that it takes place in its own world. And usually it is the sword and sorcery type world, sword fighting, magic, different races, dwarves and elves, things of that nature. But the important thing to remember is that high fantasy, it takes place in its own world. Typical examples of high fantasy would be Lord of the Rings, Ring Cycle by J.R. Tolkien, and George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. And my number 1 favorite genre is contemporary fantasy. Contemporary fantasy's main points are that it takes place in modern times, people have modern technology, and it takes place in our world. It's not a made-up world, it's the world that we live in, or at least one that's very similar to it, but it has fantastic elements to it, or supernatural creatures, magic, sometimes portals to other worlds. But the main thing is that it takes place in our world, and it takes place in modern times. There are different subgenres of it, like urban fantasy or dark urban fantasy, mythical fantasy, but mostly it's all grouped together under modern setting and mystical elements of the supernatural. Good examples of this are the Percy Jackson series, Mortal Instruments series, the Sookie Stackhouse series, and of course Modern Disciples. And that is my Top 5 Wednesday for genres. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, as you can see, I'm very into fantasy and mystical, and I like books that are fun. And that's probably why I write those types of books. But any other thoughts? You want to tell me some genres you like? Leave it in the comments below. As always, pertinent contact information down in the abyss where you can find it there. Please comment, rate, subscribe. You know the drill. And until next time, this is I.S. Anderson telling everybody, make your lives grand and have a good day. Thank you very much. And remember, kids, when you make pizza at home, let it cool down for a bit before you eat it. Otherwise, you could end up with this.